Welcome, traveler. Tonight, we'll drift into the timeless tale of EarthBound, a journey of courage, friendship, and the quiet strength of four children who set out to save the world. As you listen, let the story guide you gently toward rest. And if you enjoy these bedtime journeys, remember to like the video, share it with a friend who might also find comfort in the story, and subscribe so you can join us each night for more adventures told softly, just for you. Onett was a town that seemed to exist in its own rhythm. A place where the days were ordinary and familiar, where neighbors waved as they watered their lawns, and children played in the streets until the sun set. That night was no different at first. The houses were quiet, the cicadas sang, and the moon cast its pale light across the rolling hills. But then, without warning, the sky cracked open with a sound like thunder, and a meteor blazed down through the darkness. It tore across the horizon, a fiery streak that ended with a shattering crash on the hill above town. The earth trembled, windows rattled, and dogs barked nervously in their yards. Inside a modest home on the edge of town, a boy named Ness awoke with a start. His room, cluttered with toys, comics, and a trusty baseball bat propped in the corner, suddenly felt smaller, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Ness was just like any other boy, curious, brave in small bursts, and yet still a child who loved the comfort of his mother's cooking and his younger sister's chatter. But as he sat up in bed, rubbing sleep from his eyes, he felt something strange. It wasn't just the noise outside. It was a pull, a whisper almost, as if the universe itself was reaching out to him. He stepped outside into the night. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth, and he saw neighbors gathering on porches, pointing toward the hills where smoke still curled into the starlit sky. Flashing red lights from the police cars flickered against the houses, and the whole town seemed alive in a way it had never been before. Ness could hear his heart thumping as he followed the sound of voices up the hill. Waiting for him, almost impatiently, was Pokey, his chubby and troublesome neighbor. Pokey was jittery, his voice filled with panic as he told Ness they had to see what had happened. Though Ness hesitated, sensing something more dangerous than Pokey could ever admit, the pull was too strong. Together, they climbed the slope, every step bringing them closer to the glowing crater. At the top of the hill, the meteor rested like a wound in the earth, its surface radiating a strange energy that hummed against their skin. It was no ordinary rock from the sky. There was a presence here, something alien, something otherworldly. In that glow, Ness felt the air shimmer, and within the silence he heard it. A warning, not spoken in words, but pressed directly into his thoughts. An evil named Giygas had awakened, a darkness so vast it threatened to swallow everything: family, friends, even the peaceful world he knew. And somehow, impossibly, this voice spoke to him. Ness, a boy with no crown, no sword, no title, just a child with a baseball bat and a curious spirit. The night no longer felt like a night at all. It felt like the beginning of something immense, a story that stretched beyond the town, beyond the stars, into realms Ness could not yet imagine. He stood at the edge of the crater, staring into the glow, his heart racing, as a thought sank into him. His life would never again be ordinary. He was being called to something greater, and though he did not understand it yet, his journey had already begun. In the days that followed the meteor's crash, the quiet little town of Onett was no longer the same. Whispers traveled from neighbor to neighbor, stories growing stranger with every retelling. Some said the meteor glowed at night. Others swore they heard voices when they stood near it. Ness couldn't shake the memory of that night. The way the air itself had seemed alive, carrying the warning of an evil too vast to fully imagine. It lingered in him like a dream he couldn't forget. Life tried to go back to normal. His mother still prepared warm meals. His little sister still asked him for help around the house. But Ness felt different. He felt watched, as though the universe had placed its hand on his shoulder and refused to let go. Even his trusty baseball bat, once just a toy, felt heavier now, as if it were waiting to serve a purpose beyond simple play. One evening, as he tried to rest, a strange sense of urgency swept over him. The world beyond his home was calling. The meteor was only the beginning. There were whispers of other places of power scattered across the land. 8 sanctuaries, sacred spots tied to the earth itself, waiting for him. Each sanctuary carried a melody, a fragment of a song. And when all 8 were gathered together, they would form the Soundstone, a mystical key that could unlock the strength needed to stand against the darkness of Giygas. Ness didn't yet understand how a simple tune could hold such power, but deep in his heart, he knew this path was meant for him. It wasn't just a choice, it was destiny, written long before he was born. The melodies would guide him, nurture him, and connect him to something greater than himself, something that stretched across time and memory. Onett was frightening, and yet there was comfort in it too. The sanctuaries were not simply places to conquer. They were echoes of the earth, reflections of childhood, courage, and dreams. They were waiting for him like pieces of a song he had always known, but never sung. Ness could almost hear the first notes humming faintly in the night air, soft and reassuring, promising that though the road ahead would be filled with danger, he would not walk it alone. And so, as the stars glittered above Onett and the world turned quietly beneath them, Ness began to sense that his small town was only the doorway to a much greater journey. One step at a time, he would leave behind the familiar and search for those 8 sanctuaries, following the promise of a melody that could save everything he loved. The town of Onett, once sleepy and quiet, now seemed to carry a restless energy, as if it too knew something had shifted. Ness wandered its streets with new eyes, noticing details that had once slipped past him. The dogs that barked at night seemed fiercer, the crows in the fields more watchful, and even the local kids who once played harmless games had grown rowdier, almost hostile, as though some unseen hand had stirred them into mischief. The air of Onett was no longer calm. It was unsettled, charged, as though it mirrored the storm rising in the wider world. It wasn't long before Ness found himself standing face to face with the first real challenge on his journey. A group of toughs led by a boy named Frank had begun terrorizing the town. They called themselves the Sharks, a gang of leather jackets, wild hair, and reckless bravado. They loitered in arcades, intimidated shopkeepers, and picked fights just to prove they could. Frank, their leader, had even built a strange, clanking machine called the Frankenstein Mark II, an invention that showed both his arrogance and his desperation to hold power. For most, the Sharks were simply troublemakers to be avoided. But for Ness, they were a test. If he couldn't face down these ordinary bullies twisted by the strange influence seeping through Onett, how could he ever hope to stand against the greater darkness of Giygas? With his baseball bat in hand and courage steeled by the memory of the meteor, Ness confronted them. The battles were not easy. Each encounter drained his strength and tested his resolve, but slowly, he pushed forward. At last, he stood before Frank himself, the self-proclaimed king of Onett's streets. Their fight was fierce, but Ness's determination never wavered. When Frank's machine clattered to the ground in defeat, the bravado drained from him, leaving behind only a boy who realized he had been swept up in something beyond his control. With a nod of respect, Frank conceded, acknowledging Ness's strength and promising to stop his gang's reign of trouble. And in that moment, the town began to change. Neighbors looked at Ness not as just another child, but as someone chosen, someone who could be relied upon. Whispers of his bravery spread, soft and reverent, like the beginnings of a legend. Though he was still only at the start of his path, Ness felt the world shift slightly beneath his feet. He was no longer walking aimlessly. He was moving forward, toward the first sanctuary that awaited him. With Frank and the sharks defeated, Onett began to settle, though not entirely. People still whispered of strange happenings around town, odd sounds echoing from the caves, animals behaving wildly, and shadows that seemed to move on their own. Ness, carrying the weight of his first victory, felt the next step calling him. Giant Step, the first of the 8 sanctuaries. The townsfolk spoke of it like a local legend, a mystical cavern hidden just beyond the hills, filled with strange creatures and guarded by something no ordinary person could defeat. Before he could enter, Ness had to prove himself to the town's mayor, B.H. Perkle, a man more concerned with appearances than actual leadership. The mayor, flustered and pompous, gave reluctant permission after Ness showed his strength against the sharks. It was a fan-favorite moment of humor, this boy standing calmly while the town's most self-important adult blustered and worried about what people might say. With that, Ness was finally allowed to step into the place where his destiny would begin to take shape. The cave to Giant Step was unlike anything Ness had seen. Shadows twisted across the walls, and the air felt alive, with an energy both eerie and beautiful. Strange enemies lurked within. Rowdy mice darting from the corners, ant-like insects scurrying underfoot, and stubborn slugs that tested his patience as much as his strength. Each step deeper into the cave seemed to echo louder, as though the earth itself were waiting for him. At the heart of the cavern, Ness met his first true trial, the Titanic ant. It was no ordinary creature. It radiated power, commanding smaller ants that swarmed like an army. The battle was fierce, the air buzzing with psychic energy as Ness called upon his PSI powers, striking with flashes of lightning that illuminated the cavern walls. When the Titanic ant finally collapsed, Ness felt a wave of calm wash over him, as though something sacred had acknowledged his victory. And then it happened. From the depths of the cave, a melody began to play, that is measurable soft, haunting, and strangely familiar, like a lullaby half-remembered from childhood. The soundstone in his hand pulsed faintly, absorbing the tune, etching it into memory. This was the first of 8 melodies, the beginning of a song that would someday be whole. Ness stood quietly, eyes closed, letting the notes wash over him. For that moment, he wasn't just a boy with a baseball bat. He was part of something ancient and eternal, connected to the land itself. When Ness stepped back into the sunlight of Onett, the town looked different. The colors seemed brighter, the air lighter. Neighbors who once doubted him now spoke with warmth, children pointed in awe, and even the mayor regarded him with quiet respect. Ness felt the melody of Giant Step humming softly inside him, a reminder that this was only the beginning. Ahead waited more sanctuaries, more melodies, and more trials to face. But for now, he carried the strength of his first true victory, and the earth itself seemed to sing with him. With Giant Step behind him, Ness's journey began to spread beyond Onett. Word of the strange boy who had defeated the local gang and claimed the first sanctuary drifted quietly from town to town. Soft stories carried on the wind, reaching places and people he had yet to see. Ness returned home for a short while. His mother, calm and kind as ever, welcomed him with a smile and made his favorite meal. It was a small moment, but one that wrapped him in peace. Because no matter how wide the world might grow, Mom's cooking always restored something deeper than strength. It mended the heart. Even many who remember his story recall that simple truth, that sometimes the warmth of home can heal more than anything found on the road. Before long, Ness felt the pull of the journey once more. A quiet call that led him toward Tucson, the next town beyond the hills. Tucson was livelier than Onett, its streets bright and busy, its people cheerful on the surface, yet beneath that liveliness, something troubled the air. Parents whispered about missing children, and rumors spread of a strange group calling themselves the Happy Happyists. Ness didn't know it yet, but in this town he would soon meet his most important companion. In Tucson, Ness found himself drawn to a small, cheerful building, the Polestar Preschool. It was run by a kind couple, whose daughter, Paula, was unlike anyone he had ever met. Paula was gentle, brave, and carried within her a quiet strength, a gift of powerful psychic energy that shimmered like light beneath the surface. But she was gone, taken by a group that called themselves the Happy Happyists, a strange cult draped in blue, dreaming of painting the entire world one single color. Blue for peace, they said. But the truth was far darker, tainted by the shadow of Giygas. Before setting out to find her, Tucson gave Ness small moments of charm, the kind of details that made the world feel alive. He stopped by the bike shop, only to realize that, somehow, riding it never quite worked out. He wandered through Berglund Park, where he met Everdred, a mischievous thief with quick words and an oddly generous heart. And through the town's winding streets, he caught the sound of laughter and rhythm. The Runaway Five, a band of blues and joy whose music filled the theater with life, even as they struggled under the weight of debt. Tucson, in its own way, was a town of contrasts, danger and delight, fear and laughter. Even as Ness prepared to face what waited beyond, the town reminded him of something precious. That no matter how dark the journey became, the world would always hold a touch of humor and a heartbeat of hope. He said, like the last note of a lullaby. Guided by courage and the faint tug of destiny, Ness made his way to Happy Happy Village, a surreal place where every house was painted blue, the trees were blue, even the cows were painted blue. The villagers, under Carpenter's spell, chanted endlessly about blue, blue, their devotion both comical and unsettling. Deep inside, in a building painted from floor to ceiling, Paula was being held prisoner, trapped by their leaders' warped ideals. Freeing her was no easy task. Ness had to navigate through the villagers, face Carpenter himself, and withstand bolts of lightning hurled down from his strange paintbrush. But when Carpenter was defeated, his obsession with blue faded away like a fog lifting from the valley. The cult dispersed, shaking off their trance, and Paula was finally free. When she joined Ness, there was an immediate sense of balance. She wasn't just another child with powers. She was the heart of the group. Compassionate yet strong. Able to unleash devastating psychic fire when the need arose. From that moment on, Ness was no longer walking alone. Together, the two children stood under the open sky. The weight of destiny heavier now, but shared between them. And though the world seemed vast and frightening, the sight of Paula at his side made Ness believe that maybe, just maybe, they could stand against the darkness. With Paula by his side, Ness felt his journey begin to grow wider, as though the path itself stretched farther than the eye could see. Together they traveled on, leaving behind the quirky brightness of Tucson and stepping into something darker. Their footsteps eventually led them to a town called Threed, a place that fans of EarthBound never forget. 3D was unsettling the moment they arrived. The streets, once meant for families and festivals, were empty. Windows were boarded shut, posters hung crooked on the walls, flapping in the night wind, and faint whispers filled the air. The town was plagued by something Ness had only begun to sense back in Onett. This time, the influence of Giygas was heavier, pressing down on every shadow. For in 3D, the dead had begun to walk. Zombies lurked in the alleyways, their figures moving stiffly under the pale glow of the street lamps. Children's toys sat abandoned in yards, left behind as families locked themselves indoors. Even the local graveyard was restless. Undead creatures stumbled between the tombstones, groaning faintly, a chilling reminder of how deep the corruption had spread. Fans still recall the way EarthBound turned suddenly eerie here, with its creepy atmosphere breaking the playful charm of the earlier towns. Ness and Paula investigated bravely, but the odds turned against them. In one of the game's most memorable moments, they were tricked and captured, locked away in a damp, dimly lit cell. For the first time, the children were helpless, unable to fight their way out. The world seemed larger and scarier than ever before. And yet, it was here, at the lowest moment, that a new hero would step forward. Far away, in the snowy land of winters, a boy named Jeff awoke. Jeff was no ordinary child. He was a genius, brilliant with machines, and quietly determined. At his boarding school, deep in the frosted mountains, he tinkered with inventions, building tools out of scraps and studying mysteries few could grasp. One night, Jeff was visited in his dreams by the image of Paula, calling out for help. Her psychic message reached across distance and into his heart. Without hesitation, Jeff packed his inventions, including a pack of tools and gadgets, and prepared to leave. Slipping out of the school under the watchful eye of the kind Dr. Onett, his eccentric father who worked in a hidden laboratory, Jeff set off on a journey of his own. Fans love this section for its quiet charm. Jeff, using a bent ruler and his ingenuity to open doors, befriending a monkey named Bubble Monkey who helped him travel across frozen lakes, and finally boarding a makeshift craft designed by his father. Alone, vulnerable, yet brilliant, Jeff pressed on, guided by the call of destiny. Eventually, through snow and forest, through caves and invention, Jeff's path converged with Ness and Paula's. In one of the most heartwarming moments of the adventure, he discovered their prison and used his skills to free them. The group was complete, or, at least, closer to complete. With Jeff's gadgets, Ness's strength, and Paula's psychic fire, the three children stood together under the ominous Threed sky. The zombies still roamed, but for the first time, the balance of power shifted. It was a reminder that even in the darkest places, help can come from afar, from people you've never met but were always meant to find. And so, Threed became more than a haunted town. It became the birthplace of a team that would carry the weight of the world together. The three children, Ness, Paula, and Jeff, now stood together in Threed, but the shadows of the town still loomed heavy. Zombies shuffled through the streets, graveyards stirred with restless spirits, and the townsfolk lived in fear. Though they were stronger now, the trio could not simply swing their bats and cast their powers at this problem. It was larger, deeper, controlled by something foul beneath the surface. In their search for answers, they discovered allies. Two brave townsfolk, known affectionately as the Zombie Paper Couple, helped them create one of the most memorable scenes in EarthBound. Using a quirky invention, sheets of paper that worked like fly traps, they spread the bait through Threed. That night, fans remember the humor and eeriness mixing together as the zombies were irresistibly drawn to the paper, stumbling clumsily into one place until they were all stuck fast. The townsfolk gathered in awe the next morning, whispering and pointing at the captured horde. For the first time in weeks, Threed could breathe. But the true cause of the nightmare still lurked deeper underground. Guided by strange hints, the children descended into foul-smelling tunnels where the air was thick and damp. There they found the source, Master Belch, a grotesque monster made of living slime, his body bubbling and dripping with ooze. The smell was so vile it nearly knocked them out before the battle even began. Fans often laugh at this part of the game, remembering how Belch belched loudly mid-fight, his stench almost a weapon of its own. The battle was strange, disgusting, and unforgettable. But with Paula's psychic fire, Jeff's clever gadgets, and Ness's steady strength, the children pushed through, gagging, yet determined. Master Belch collapsed with a final wet groan, retreating into the shadows, swearing revenge. And with his defeat, the zombies of Threed lost their master's grip, vanishing back into the silence of the earth. The graveyards grew still again, and the townsfolk emerged cautiously. Their lives finally returned to them. Just beyond, in a hidden valley, the children stumbled into one of EarthBound's most beloved discoveries, Saturn Valley, home of the Mr. Saturns. They were odd little creatures, round, with long noses and simple bows on their heads, speaking in a charming, broken language that made everyone smile. "We are Mr. Saturn," they said, bouncing and waddling around. They offered kindness, healing, and strange inventions, showing no fear, even with Giygas' shadow spreading across the world. Fans treasure this place for its whimsy, a sudden burst of warmth and humor after the darkness of Threed. The Mr. Saturns, in their peculiar way, gave the children rest and reminded them of something important. No matter how frightening the journey became, there would always be places of safety, kindness, and laughter along the way. With Threed free of its curse and new friends in Saturn Valley, Ness, Paula, and Jeff felt the melody of destiny calling them onward once again, toward the next sanctuary waiting in the distance. With Threed freed of its curse, and Saturn Valley tucked warmly into memory, Ness, Paula, and Jeff pressed forward on their growing journey. The road wound through dusty deserts and strange highways, where the heat shimmered on the horizon, and quirky travelers waited by the roadside with odd requests. They met wandering entertainers, circus performers, and even camels. Each encounter a reminder that EarthBound was never just about danger. It was about humor, strangeness, and the unpredictable joys of the world. Their travels led them next to Forside, the largest city they had yet seen. If Onett was quiet and Tucson was homely, Then Forside was overwhelming. A neon skyline, traffic lights flashing endlessly, and skyscrapers towering into the night. It was the kind of city where a boy like Ness might feel small. But in its glow, they found one of the game's most beloved recurring groups, the Runaway Five. The Runaway Five were a jazz and blues band, dressed in sharp suits, slick shades, and smooth charisma. Their music filled the Paula theater with rhythm that made the whole city come alive. Fans love how this moment made EarthBound feel bigger than an adventure game. Suddenly, you weren't just fighting monsters. You were helping a real touring band, stuck in trouble only you could solve. For though they were adored by audiences, the Runaway Five were trapped under a mountain of debt to the theater's owner, unable to leave town or continue their tour. Ness and his friends, though only children, once again became problem solvers for the adults around them. With courage and a few clever turns of fate, they freed the band from their crushing debt, a fan-favorite moment, when the Runaway Five piled into their big, flashy van and roared out of the city, waving to the kids like old friends. Their music wasn't just entertainment, it was part of the journey. A joyful rhythm echoing through a world still shadowed by Giygas. But Forside held darker currents too. Behind the glow of the city lights stood a powerful figure, Giygas Monotoli, a businessman who ruled over the skyscrapers and streets. People whispered his name with fear, for Monotoli was not simply a rich man. He was under the influence of something greater, the shadow of Giygas seeping into his mind. Ness and his friends could feel it. Every corner of the city carried a quiet tension, a hum that seemed to follow their steps. And so, even as the children laughed with the Runaway Five, feeling the rhythm of the city under their feet, they knew Forside would not simply be a place of music and light. Something dangerous waited at the top of its towers, and fate was guiding them there, one step at a time. The city of Forside glimmered with promise, but beneath its neon lights and bustling crowds, the children felt something darker stirring. Skyscrapers stretched so tall they seemed to pierce the clouds, and at the very top of that glittering skyline was Giygas Monotoli's tower. People whispered his name with awe and fear, describing him as untouchable, a man whose wealth and influence had made him king of the city. Yet Ness, Paula, and Jeff could sense it immediately. Monotoli was not acting on his own. The shadow of Giygas coiled around him, twisting his will. In the streets, the group encountered Pokey once more, now dressed in fine clothes and speaking with arrogance. He strutted through Forside as though he belonged among the city's elite. This was no longer the nervous, cowardly neighbor Ness had once known. Pokey had changed, and not for the better. Fans of EarthBound always remember this moment. How shocking it felt to see a childhood friend standing beside Monotoli, sneering with a confidence that came not from courage, but from betrayal. Things grew worse when Paula was suddenly kidnapped. Ness and Jeff searched desperately, their hearts sinking as they realized their companion had been taken into Monotoli's grasp. Without her, their group felt incomplete, the balance disrupted. Paula, who had always been brave and calm even in danger, was locked away in the high towers of Forside, used as a pawn in Monotoli's schemes. Fans remember this section with a mix of dread and determination. It wasn't just about saving the world anymore. It was about saving the friend who had become the heart of the team. The boys pushed through the city, navigating shady backrooms, bright theaters, and secret passageways that revealed the underbelly of Forside. They discovered the true extent of Monotoli's control. His skyscraper guarded by henchmen and shrouded in corruption. Each floor seemed to echo with Paula's presence, as though her psychic call still reached out to Ness, urging him to press onward. Finally, in the confrontation high above the city, Ness and Jeff stood face to face with Monotoly. He was no longer a man of his own will. His eyes carried the hollow influence of Giygas. And at his side stood Pokey, smug, self-satisfied, mocking Ness with cruel words. Yet, when Paula was rescued and Monotoly's mind cleared, a truth came to light. Even Monotoly had been just another victim of Giygas's growing power, a puppet twisted into greed and fear. The children left the tower not as conquerors, but as rescuers. Paula was free, and with her return, the team was whole again. Yet the sight of Pokey smirking in the shadows haunted Ness. The betrayal of a neighbor, once so familiar, now stood as a warning. The evil of Giygas wasn't just out there in monsters and cults, it was creeping into people's hearts, even those Ness had once called friends. And as the skyline of Fourside blinked and buzzed below them, the group realized something important. Their quest wasn't only about sanctuaries and melodies. It was about facing the corruption of the world itself and finding the courage to save those who could still be saved. With Paula safely returned, the group felt whole again. But the shadow of Fourside lingered. Pokey's betrayal weighed heavily on Ness, a quiet reminder that not all enemies wore monstrous faces. Sometimes, they wore the smile of an old neighbor. Still, the journey pressed onward, carrying the children far beyond the places they once thought they knew. The call of destiny guided them next toward Winters, the snowy land Jeff had once called home. The frosted hills and icy lakes shimmered in white, stretching endlessly beneath a pale, silent sky. It was a quiet land, filled with mysteries, strange caverns, quirky inventors, and creatures that seemed born of the cold itself. Returning here, Jeff felt both pride and unease. For Winters wasn't just where he grew up. It was where his eccentric father, Dr. Onett, tinkered away in his hidden laboratory. Fans often smile at this reunion, remembering the awkward warmth between father and son. The doctor, brilliant but scatterbrained, offered advice and odd machines, always speaking as though his next idea was more important than a hug. Winters tested the group with new challenges: icy caves where woolly mammoths roamed, and laboratories filled with odd contraptions. Yet it also gave them hope. From the lab, Dr. Onett gifted them a strange invention: a submarine crafted by the Mr. Saturns. It would carry them across the ocean, bridging their path toward the next great destination, Summers. Summers was the opposite of Winters in every way. Where Winters was frosted silence, Summers was a paradise of golden sand and sparkling water. Fans remember this area for its charm and humor. A tropical escape where eccentric tourists wandered in swimsuits, sipping drinks beneath palm trees. The music alone made it unforgettable. A jazzy tune that felt like stepping into a postcard. Ness and his friends strolled the boardwalk, met with strange characters, and explored shops selling bizarre items at ridiculous prices. Even in a land that seemed carefree, Giygas's shadow reached, reminding them that no place was untouched. And, as always, the Runaway Five weren't far behind. Freed from their debts in Fourside, they appeared again in Summers, their music filling the air with joy. Fans adore how this band seemed to follow the children like guardians of rhythm, showing up at just the right time to lift spirits and remind them of the fun still left in the world. Their performances were electric, their banter hilarious, and every appearance became a highlight in the journey. But beneath the sunlit charm of summers lay hints of deeper mysteries. Conversations in quiet corners spoke of sacred lands, of temples hidden in deserts, of a prince training in faraway places. The threads of destiny were weaving tighter now, pulling the group towards something grander than oceans and cities. Their path would soon lead them to Scaraba, to Dalam, and to another chosen child who would complete their circle. For now, though, Ness, Paula, and Jeff stood beneath the palm trees of summers, the waves breaking softly against the shore. It was a rare moment of beauty, a calm before the storm. Fans often look back at summers with a smile, for it was the last bright paradise before the children stepped into the most mystical chapters of their journey. From the beaches of summers, the children's path stretched farther than ever before. Whispers led them across the desert to a land called Scaraba, a place of golden sands, ancient pyramids, and bustling markets filled with strange and colorful characters. The sun beat down heavily, and the wind carried with it the scent of spices and stories as old as time. Merchants in the bazaar tried to sell the children odd trinkets. Camels wandered past, and treasure hunters whispered of hidden riches buried beneath the endless dunes. Scaraba felt both magical and dangerous. The desert was alive with scorpions, snakes, and mirages that shimmered on the horizon. In one fan-favorite scene, the group even encountered a talking stone that muttered riddles in the middle of the sandstorm, testing their patience and humor in equal measure. And deep within the desert stood a grand pyramid, its walls covered in ancient carvings, hiding puzzles and guardians that challenged their courage. Each step forward felt like stepping into history itself, as though the children were uncovering the bones of a world long forgotten. But the greatest turning point did not come from Scaraba. It came from far away, in the mystical land of Dalam. High above the clouds, beyond mountains and rivers, a prince named Pooh lived and trained in solitude. Unlike Ness, who had been thrust into destiny by chance, or Jeff, who relied on his machines, Pooh had been preparing his whole life for this path. His kingdom expected greatness, but even so, the road to becoming a true warrior was not easy. Pooh's training sequence remains one of the most unforgettable in EarthBound. Guided by his master, he was told to endure the harshest trials. One by one, he gave up the comforts of the body, his sight, his hearing, even his limbs, as part of a ritual to strengthen his spirit. In silence and darkness, stripped of everything, Pooh faced pain and fear. And yet, he did not falter. When the trials ended, he emerged stronger. His PSI powers sharpened to a blade, his resolve unshakable. Fans often remember this as one of the game's most profound moments. A reminder that true strength is not just physical, it is the endurance of the spirit. When Pooh joined Ness, Paula, and Jeff, the circle of chosen children was complete. 4 stood now where once there had been 1, each with their own gifts and burdens. Ness, with his steady courage and growing power. Paula, the heart of the group, whose compassion burned as fiercely as her psychic flames. Jeff, the mind, a genius whose gadgets and logic often saved them in ways brute force never could. And Pooh, the disciplined spirit, whose training in Dalam gave him strength drawn from beyond the physical world. Together, they felt the prophecy breathing around them, as if the earth itself sighed in relief that the team had finally gathered. Scaraba's sands still whispered secrets, and Giygas' shadow still stretched across the horizon. But with Pooh by their side, the children felt, for the first time, that they were not just surviving this journey. They were ready to shape it. With Prince Pooh now among them, the group of four felt truly complete. The prophecy whispered across the land had gathered them together, and their bond carried them onward. From Skaraba's golden sands, the children boarded the submarine gifted by the eccentric Dr. Andonuts and the lovable Mr. Saturns. The little craft chugged beneath the waves, its metal body creaking softly as the ocean swallowed the light above. The voyage beneath the sea was unsettling. Fans often remember this section for its mix of humor and unease. Quirky fish darting past the windows, strange sea creatures brushing against the glass, and the feeling that something vast and unseen lurked in the deep. Ness and his friends, seated shoulder to shoulder in the cramped vessel, could only imagine what waited outside. For hours they drifted, until the water around them grew darker, thicker, almost swamp-like. Their destination was a place few dared to enter: deep darkness. The swamp was unlike anything they had seen before. The air buzzed with insects, and each step sank into muck that clung to their legs. The water was thick, and the deeper they waded, the more their health seemed to slip away, as though the land itself resisted them. Strange enemies lurked in the shadows, trees that attacked without warning, swamp monsters rising from the bog, and crocodiles that snapped their jaws in the murky water. Even the sun seemed blotted out, leaving the swamp cloaked in an eerie, timeless twilight. But amidst this discomfort, EarthBound delivered one of its most fan-favorite quirks: Dungeon Man. At first, the children stumbled upon a massive stone tower filled with winding halls, silly signs, and bizarre little details left behind by its creator, Brick Road. What they didn't expect was that Brick Road himself had transformed into the dungeon, literally becoming Dungeon Man. Fans treasure this moment, laughing at the absurdity of walking through a living dungeon, reading his handwritten notes on the walls as though they were diary entries. When they finally reached the heart of Dungeon Man, Brick Road greeted them warmly, his face emerging from the stone itself. He joined the party briefly, stomping across the swamp as a towering ally. It was both hilarious and comforting, this massive living dungeon, marching alongside four children against the darkness. Sadly, Dungeon Man's path was short-lived. His giant body became tangled in the swamp's palm trees, forcing him to stay behind. With a smile, he bid the children farewell, proud to have helped, if only for a moment. Beyond Dungeon Man, the swamp grew heavier. The air seemed to pulse, the trees groaned, and the influence of Giygas could be felt pressing closer. And yet, with every step, Ness and his companions drew nearer to the sanctuaries and the melodies that would strengthen them. Deep darkness tested their endurance, but it also reminded them of something important. This world, no matter how strange or frightening, was filled with kindness and laughter in the most unexpected places. As they pressed deeper into the swamp, the children held that thought close, carrying it like a lantern against the growing dark. From the swampy depths of deep darkness, the children's path wound back toward civilization, once again touching Summers with its bright shores and elegant streets. Summers, though beautiful, was not just a vacation spot. It hid puzzles beneath its charm. In the museum, strange exhibits hinted at forgotten histories. Hieroglyphs carved in stone, whispering of ancient powers and secrets that tied directly to the sanctuaries Ness was seeking. Tourists gawked at the displays, oblivious to the weight they carried. But for the chosen children, the clues were a call forward, pointing them towards Skaraba's pyramids and beyond. Even as they solved riddles and studied relics, the threads of Giygas's influence pulled tighter. They traveled by sky, sea, and sand, the world itself beginning to feel smaller as their journey grew larger. In Scaraba, the pyramid revealed guardians of stone and riddles of light, testing their resolve with puzzles that seemed as old as time itself. But it was not the ancient past that haunted them most. It was something far stranger, buried deep beneath the present world. Far away, in the quiet green fields of Winters, a place Jeff knew well, rumors spread of a strange base hidden beneath Stonehenge. To most, it was just a circle of rocks standing silently in the grass, a natural wonder admired by curious travelers. But Ness and his friends learned that beneath those stones was a laboratory of horrors, one of the most haunting places EarthBound fans still remember. Stonehenge Base was a twisting maze of cold steel, buzzing machinery, and creatures warped by experiments. Strange aliens patrolled its corridors, their forms sharp and otherworldly. Captured humans and animals were held in stasis tubes, glowing faintly, their eyes closed as though dreaming. It was here that the children truly saw how far Giygas's corruption had spread. This was not just a battle against monsters. It was a war against despair itself. In one of the most chilling and memorable moments, the group discovered that Dr. Onett, Jeff's father, had been kidnapped and imprisoned inside the base. The reunion was shocking, both heartwarming and unsettling, as Jeff worked to free the man whose inventions had shaped so much of their journey. Onett, shaken but unbroken, spoke of the experiments done here, the terrifying hints of how Giygas's power was twisting the very laws of nature. The children fought their way through the base, facing off against Starman enemies, sleek, robotic beings that had become iconic fan-favorite foes. Their glowing eyes and mechanical precision tested every ounce of the group's strength. And yet, with courage and teamwork, Ness and his companions pushed forward, dismantling the heart of the base and freeing those who had been trapped. When they finally emerged back into the open air of Winters, the night sky seemed a little colder, a little emptier. Stonehenge Base was destroyed, but its memory lingered, a reminder of just how deep the evil of Giygas had rooted itself into the world. Ness looked at his friends, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, and knew they would need more than strength to finish this journey. They would need hope, connection, and every sanctuary melody still waiting to be found. And somewhere far beyond the stars, Giygas stirred. From the cold metal of Stonehenge Base, the children's journey turned once more toward heat and sand. Scaraba awaited them again, its golden desert stretching endlessly beneath a blazing sun. Merchants crowded the bazaar with colorful stalls, camels trudged across the horizon, and the call of the pyramids hummed like a low drumbeat across the dunes. These pyramids were not just ruins, they were sanctuaries of power, protectors of ancient melodies that Ness was destined to gather. Fans always remember how entering the pyramid felt like stepping into another world. The air inside was heavy and dry, echoing with the whispers of the past. Hieroglyphs lined the walls, telling stories no one alive could fully read. Strange guardians, animated from stone, came to life the moment Ness and his friends stepped close, their eyes glowing as though fueled by centuries of patience. These were the hieroglyph warriors, mystical beings with long spears and silent faces, testing the chosen children to prove their worth. Each step deeper into the pyramid was like peeling back layers of time. Pressure plates clicked beneath their feet. Walls shifted to reveal hidden passages, and ancient riddles tested their minds as much as their strength. Fans recall how this section blended mystery with tension, as though the pyramid itself was alive, pushing intruders to prove their courage. Paula's fire lit the shadows. Jeff's tools pried open secrets. Pooh's discipline held them steady, and Ness guided them onward, the soundstone glowing faintly with each victory. At the heart of the pyramid, they faced one of its greatest guardians, an ancient being who seemed carved from the desert itself. A protector who tested not just their powers but their resolve to continue. When they triumphed, the stone walls hummed with energy, and another sanctuary melody joined the others in the soundstone. The notes blended seamlessly with what Ness had already gathered, the song slowly building into something more whole, more powerful, more hauntingly familiar. As they emerged from the pyramid, the desert wind carried a new sense of purpose. The melodies were not simply notes. They were memories. Pieces of a song Ness felt belonged to him, though he didn't yet understand how. The earth seemed to sigh in approval, as though it too knew the children were on the right path. Beyond Scaraba, their path stretched further into lands stranger still. Rumors spoke of a kingdom above the clouds, of trials that tested the spirit, of a realm where dreams and reality blurred together. Dalam and other mystical sanctuaries waited, each one stranger and more demanding than the last. The children pressed on, 4 silhouettes walking side by side across the desert sunset, their shadows stretching long behind them. With every melody gained, they felt stronger. But with every step, the presence of Giygas pressed closer, a darkness waiting in the corners of their journey. The melodies gathered from the sanctuaries began to hum together, forming not just a song but a bridge. Ness carried the soundstone close, and every time a new note was added, he felt the weight of something deeper pressing into his heart. And then one day he was no longer simply walking through deserts or climbing through caves. He was pulled inward, into a world unlike any other. This place was Magicant, a dreamlike land born entirely from Ness's own mind. It was soft, surreal, and deeply personal. A fan-favorite part of EarthBound, remembered for its beauty and strangeness. The skies glowed in shades of pink and violet, like a sunset that never ended. The ground shimmered, as though it was stitched together from childhood memories, and the air itself felt warm, almost comforting. It was Ness's subconscious made real, and here he would face not monsters from outside, but the echoes of himself. Wandering through Magicant, Ness met figures that seemed familiar yet strange. Memories of people from his hometown, fragments of thoughts, and even reflections of his own fears. Fans often recall the mix of humor and unease here. Talking objects, odd little beings, and towns that felt like home but shifted in unsettling ways. The deeper Ness explored, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a dream. It was a test of who he truly was. One of the most powerful moments came when Ness confronted the evil part of himself. A shadowy double emerged, representing all the doubt, fear, and anger he had carried with him. The battle was not just physical, it was spiritual. To continue forward, Ness had to accept that this darkness was part of him. Fans love this moment for its depth, a reminder that courage isn't about being flawless. It's about acknowledging weakness and continuing anyway. When the shadow was defeated, Ness felt something shift inside him. The melodies in the soundstone swelled, fusing into a complete song. In that moment, he awakened fully to his potential, unlocking the power that had been waiting within him all along. It was as though the earth, the sanctuaries, and his very soul had come together in harmony. Ness was no longer just a boy with a bat. He was the chosen one, fully realized. Magicant began to fade, its dream colors melting away, but the strength it gave remained. Ness emerged back into the waking world changed, his spirit whole. His friends looked at him with quiet understanding. Though they had not walked through Magicant themselves, they could feel the difference. Ness was stronger, steadier, carrying a light that could face even the deepest dark. And far away, in that darkness, Giygas stirred restlessly, sensing that the children were nearly ready for him. The battle between hope and despair was approaching, and Magicant had been Ness's final preparation. With Magicant behind him, Ness stepped back into the world changed. The soundstone now carried the full melody, each note weaving into a song that was both ancient and personal, both cosmic and deeply human. It was the song of his childhood, of his land, of his very soul, and it had awakened in him a power meant for one purpose: to face Giygas. The four children, Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, stood together, their bond unshakable now. They had walked deserts, crossed oceans, fought cults, freed towns, explored pyramids, braved haunted swamps, and even stared into the depths of Ness's own heart. Yet the final step of the journey lay not in their present, but in the past. For Giygas was not waiting in a distant land, but in another time altogether, where his power had first taken form. Dr. Onett, Jeff's eccentric but brilliant father, spoke softly of what had to be done. In his lab, surrounded by machines that hummed and sparked with otherworldly energy, he explained that the children could not travel to the past as they were. Their human bodies could not survive the strain of such a journey. The only way forward was for their souls, their very consciousness, to be transferred into mechanical shells. Fans often remember this moment as one of the most chilling in EarthBound. The lab, usually a place of quirky inventions, suddenly felt grave and heavy. The children looked at one another, silent, realizing what was being asked of them. To become machines, even temporarily, was to give up the warmth of being human, to risk never returning to their families, their homes, their ordinary lives. And yet, there was no hesitation. They had come too far, carried too much, to stop now. The labs one by one, Ness and his friends climbed into the strange pods Dr. Onett had built. The machines hissed and clicked, wires wrapping around them, lights pulsing brighter and brighter. Their mothers and fathers were not here to hold them, but the thought of their families gave them courage. Paula closed her eyes and prayed. Jeff thought of his father's pride. Pooh recalled the discipline of his training. And Ness thought of the melody, the song that now lived inside him, steady and sure. When the machines finally roared to life, the children's bodies slumped, motionless. Their souls had left them, drawn into the waiting robotic shells. The transformation was complete. They looked at one another, not with faces of flesh, but with cold, mechanical frames. And yet their bond still glowed within. They were still Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh. They were still children, and they were still determined to save the world. The lab door opened with a heavy groan. Beyond it lay a path into the past, where Giygas awaited. The children stepped forward, the sound of their metal footsteps echoing through the chamber, steady and solemn. For fans of EarthBound, this moment has always lingered, a quiet, sobering reminder that even in a game full of humor and charm, the heart of the story was sacrifice, courage, and the hope of 4 children who refused to turn away from destiny. The machines in Dr. Andonutz's lab roared and hummed, then faded into silence. When the children opened their robotic eyes, they no longer stood in the familiar present. They had been transported into the past, an alien, distorted place where time itself seemed broken. The air was heavy, thick with a dread that clung to their frames like shadow. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the ground did not fully exist beneath them. This world was not like the deserts, cities, or swamps they had crossed. It was a nightmare landscape, organic and mechanical fused together, a living corridor of pulsing walls and twisting veins. Strange shapes flickered in the shadows, the remnants of creatures too warped to be named. Fans often describe this section as one of the most haunting in EarthBound, where the quirky charm of the adventure melted away, replaced by unease that lingered even outside the game. Deeper and deeper they went, the walls narrowing, the colors shifting between blood red and shadow black. The air seemed to hum with voices that were not voices, whispers that pressed against their minds without words. The path twisted like a maze, pulling them toward something vast and incomprehensible. Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh walked in silence, the sound of their mechanical footsteps steady, their courage the only light in the oppressive dark. And then, at the heart of this alien abyss, they saw it. Giygas. Giygas, he was not a monster in any familiar sense. There was no body to strike, no face to confront. Instead, he was chaos itself, an endless, swirling storm of red and black, shapes twisting and distorting in ways the human eye could barely understand. His form pulsed like a heartbeat, his presence filling the air with despair. To look at him was to feel madness tug at the edges of your mind. Fans remember this moment as one of the most unsettling in all of gaming. The realization that Giygas was not something to be fought in the usual way. He was evil itself, stripped of logic, pure destruction. The children stood small before him, their robotic frames trembling under the weight of his aura. They raised their powers, Ness's strikes, Paula's fire, Jeff's inventions, Pooh's disciplined techniques. And they fought with everything they had. Yet, each attack seemed to fade into the storm, swallowed by the chaos. Giygas was untouchable, infinite. The more they struck, the more hopeless it seemed. The alien cavern pulsed with his laughter, though it wasn't laughter at all. It was a distortion, a sound so unnatural that it rattled in their minds. For the first time, the children truly felt fear, not of monsters or cultists, but of something that could not be comprehended. And yet, they did not turn back. Ness gripped the sound stone within him, feeling the melodies vibrate faintly, as though reminding him that there was still a way forward. The battle had begun, but this was no ordinary fight. To defeat Giygas, they would need something greater than weapons or PSI. The battle against Giygas raged in the alien void, the children striking with every ounce of strength they had. Ness called down thunder and light. Paula sent waves of fire. Jeff fired his inventions, and Pooh unleashed the discipline of his training. But every blow seemed to vanish into nothingness. Giygas was not a creature of flesh. He was despair itself, swirling endlessly, shifting shapes too strange to hold in memory. His presence pressed down on them, whispering madness, twisting their thoughts until even breathing felt impossible. And then Paula, her eyes closed, her voice trembling, chose something different. She prayed. At first it was a soft, desperate whisper, a plea cast into the void. The others looked at her, uncertain, but they felt the power of her words. Paula's prayer traveled outward, beyond the alien cavern, beyond even the present moment. It stretched across space and time, reaching the people who had touched their journey. In Tucson, at the little preschool, Paula's family felt her voice and bowed their heads. In Onett, Ness's mother paused from her chores, sensing her son's presence, her love flowing outward to him. In Winters, Dr. Andonitz felt the prayer stir his heart, pride swelling for Jeth. In Dalam, the people thought of Pooh, their prince, standing bravely for the world. Each prayer added strength, light pushing gently against the endless storm. The children felt it, love, faith, connection, pouring into them, bolstering their spirits. Giygas roared, his form convulsing, as though the purity of those prayers burned against his chaos. Still, Paula prayed again. Her words spread farther, reaching friends they had met on the road. The runaway five, who put down their instruments in silence, sending their thoughts. The Mr. Saturns, bouncing with devotion. Everdread, the rogue from Berglund Park, quietly cheering them on. The world, in its small and quirky ways, was standing behind the four children. And then Paula prayed one final time. Her words reached beyond the world, beyond the story itself. They reached someone else, someone holding the controller, someone watching their journey unfold. The prayer reached the player. It was a moment fans never forgot. The game asked not for more attacks, not for more PSI. It asked for faith. It broke the wall between story and reality, calling the player themselves to lend strength. And in that quiet, startling moment, the battle turned. The prayers grew stronger, battering against the storm of Giygas's power. His form distorted wildly, his voice a chorus of static and despair. The void shuddered, as if even the darkness itself could not withstand the combined hope of the children, their families, their world, and the player who had guided them this far. Beat. Let it breathe. Then, with quiet triumph, for the first time, Giygas faltered. The music swells in the mind's ear. The void trembled as the prayers grew louder, weaving together like a chorus. The melody that Ness had carried through the sanctuaries now resonated, not just within him, but across the world. Every friend, every family member, every stranger touched by the children's journey lent their spirit to the battle. Soft, almost fourth wall breaking again. Even the unseen presence of the player became part of the song. Giygas screamed. It was not a scream in the way humans understood. It was a distortion, a tearing sound that bent the very air. His form convulsed, spiraling into shapes too chaotic to name. The endless storm unraveling. His voice, once filled with hatred, began to tremble with fear. Paula's final prayer pierced him, shining like light in endless darkness. The prayers of the world were too much even for despair itself. And then, with one last desperate cry, Giygas collapsed. The storm dissolved into silence. The alien cavern, once alive with pulsing dread, grew still. The walls stopped twisting, the voices faded, and the children stood quietly in their robotic shells. They had done the impossible, not by strength alone, but by connection, by love, and by the bonds that reached across time and space. Slowly, their souls drifted back into their human bodies. Ness opened his eyes to see his own hands again, small, bruised, and very human. Paula, Jeff, and Pooh awoke too, each blinking as though returning from a long, distant dream. They looked at one another, exhausted but alive. And in their weary smiles, there was no need for words. They had faced the unfaceable, and they had endured. Dr. Onett and the others hurried to greet them, relief softening every line in their faces. It was as if the whole world exhaled at once, releasing a breath it had been holding for far too long. The weight of Giygas was gone. The air felt lighter, the sky seemed clearer. The earth itself felt calmer beneath their feet. Towns would heal, children would play, families would laugh again. The darkness had passed. The four companions felt the quiet more deeply than anyone else. They knew what they had given up, and what they had protected. They had looked into chaos itself and returned, not with glory or pride, but with quiet understanding. They carried the proof that even the purest evil could be undone, not by strength alone, but by courage and hope. It was over. The prophecy was fulfilled. The world was safe. But journeys do not end all at once. There was still the road home. Still the goodbyes waiting to be spoken. Still the question of what it meant to return to the lives they had left behind. And so, Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh began their final walk together, heading back toward the places they had come from, knowing, gently, that they would never truly be the same again. The battle was over. Giygas was gone. His chaos dissolved into silence, and the world, for the first time in what felt like forever, breathed easily again. The children, weary but triumphant, began the long walk home. No monsters leapt from the shadows. No cults or corrupted towns blocked their path. Only the sound of their footsteps, steady and familiar, carrying them back to the lives they had left behind. They traveled together for a while, savoring the bond that had carried them through deserts, oceans, pyramids, swamps, and alien voids. But slowly, one by one, they returned to where they belonged. In winters, Jeff said goodbye, his quiet eyes filled with unspoken gratitude. He returned to his father, Dr. Onett, the man who had always been distant yet proud. Fans often remember this moment, the boy genius walking back into the snowy fields of his homeland, forever changed by the friends who had shown him what it meant to belong. In Dalam, Pooh bowed deeply, his words measured and graceful. As a prince, his duty was to his people, but he left with more than discipline. He carried the warmth of companionship, of laughter shared between equals. He promised to train harder than ever, to keep his kingdom strong, his farewell solemn yet filled with pride. In Tucson, Paula returned to her family at the Polestar preschool. Her parents rushed to her, tears of joy streaming down their faces. She turned back to Ness with a gentle smile, a silent thank you for everything they had endured together. Fans often hold this moment close. Paula, safe again, yet forever marked as the girl whose prayers had saved the world. And at last, Ness walked alone toward Onett, the town where it all began. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the hills. Children played in the yards, shopkeepers closed up their stalls, and the air carried the simple peace of an ordinary evening. Ness's home stood waiting, warm light glowing through its windows. Inside, his mother greeted him with calm affection, his sister with playful chatter, his father's voice once more on the phone offering encouragement from afar. It was as though no time had passed, and yet Ness knew everything had changed. He climbed into his bed, the same one he had left on that strange night when the meteor first crashed. His bat leaned in the corner, his backpack rested by the door. Outside, the world was safe, and for now, his journey was complete. He closed his eyes, the melody of the soundstone humming faintly in his memory, a song he would never forget. EarthBound ended not with fanfare, but with peace. 4 children had saved the world, not through power alone, but through courage, friendship, and the prayers of everyone who believed in them. And as Ness drifted into sleep, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as though the universe itself was grateful for the boy who had carried its hope. And so, the story of EarthBound comes to a close, Ness and his friends returning home after saving the world, their courage forever remembered. Thank you for staying with me through this gentle retelling. If this story helped you relax, I invite you to like the video, share it with someone who loves cozy tales, and subscribe to the channel, so you'll always have another adventure waiting when it's time to unwind. Until next time, rest well.